Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first webinar in this series. Today we will be going over the SBA's Disaster Assistance Program. So today's agenda will go, first I'll start with just a welcome. So once again, welcome. Then I will go over the platform, and then we have Jack here from SBA to go over their disaster assistance programs, and then we'll have a short question and answer session. So this webinar is hosted by the Thread Capital team, which is a subsidiary of the Wool Center, and Thread Capital's goals are to build on the legacy to provide capital coaching and connections for entrepreneurs across North Carolina that are looking to build better lives, better businesses, and stronger communities. So today's webinar is through GoToWebinar. As you guys have all entered, you are currently all muted. During the question and answer session, you can raise your hand if you have a question, and I, as in Jaleisha, will unmute you to ask those questions. We've muted everyone to cut down the background noise and data overload. You can ask those questions throughout, and I will answer them at the end. At the end of the webinar, we will also send you a link to the video as well as a PDF of the presentation. So next, I will turn over to Jack to go through his presentation. And if you have any questions or any ideas of future webinars that we should do, please feel free to send those over to us as well. There you go.
Thank you, Jaleesa. And good afternoon. My name is Jack Camp, and I am a public affairs specialist with the Small Business Administration's Office of Disaster Assistance out of Atlanta. I'm currently here in North Carolina, unfortunately due to Florence. I've been here several times for disasters over the years. I was most recently here in May because of the tornado that we had over in Greensboro. But today we're going to talk about how the SBA helps survivors recover from disasters, and hopefully give you a little information to help you help them vis-a-vis our program. And we're going to start out talking about the program. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the various types of disaster declarations, and tell you about our loans. We have a couple of different types of loans, the process, what the process is to apply for a loan, and then talk a little bit about disaster preparedness. And that's going to be the order that we'll take. The Small Business Administration has several different types of disaster declarations, and of course we can, it's usually a natural event like a hurricane, tornado, flood, volcanic eruption. It can be a man-made event like the oil spill, the Gulf Horizon oil spill back in 2010. So there's lots of different events that can cause a disaster. For example, in Florida right now, of course, you've heard of Michael, but we're also working a disaster for red tide and a toxic algae bloom. So SBA really runs the gamut. And in our disaster program, we have three basic types of loans. We have a loan for homeowners and renters. And, that's a big message that we try to push out there. People don't realize that they look at our name, Small Business Administration, and it confuses them when we say that we make loans to homeowners and renters, but we do. We make physical disaster loans to businesses, and then our working capital loans are, we call them economic injury disaster loans. And when we make a business loan, a lot of times we can combine that, and it'll be both have a physical part of it and an economic injury part of it also. and I'll go into that later. So, you're typically making loans either homeowners or renters or businesses, with two types of loans for the businesses. We utilize our resource partners. They are crucial to our success in a disaster. Here in the SBDCs here in North Carolina, it's named the SBTDC, which is the Small Business Technology Development Center, the Women's Business Centers, the Service Corps of Retired Executives. We use Chambers of Commerce, etc., economic development authorities, whatever is available to us. And often our partners work with their clients and the survivors to help them complete their loan applications and to prepare their financial statements. They follow up assistance to businesses to help them after the loan's been approved, or if we were unable to make a loan, or the application was incomplete. And really, a lot of times when businesses come to are seeking help after disaster, it's not just with their losses. They need management and counseling services. This is probably an issue that predated the disaster, but it's crucial, in the face of a disaster. And then, of course, also our partners help us find suitable locations for our centers in the disaster area. SBA will set up separate centers from FEMA from time to time. We have at current 10 business recovery centers here in North Carolina. We haven't opened any disaster loan operation centers yet, but we also work side by side with FEMA. And one of the things that makes our resource partners so important to us is your local connection to the community. I mean, these are your neighbors. You know these people. Me, I come in, I'm from Atlanta. I serve everything east of the Mississippi. These people don't know me or the people that work with me, but they do know you. So that makes you crucial to our success. And we have been very busy here in North Carolina. This is unfortunately a pretty major event. These numbers are from a couple of days ago. Through the 14th, we were up to 3,400 loans approved for over $141 million. We're actually right now, as of last night, we were at 4,400 loans approved for about $185 million. So there's really a lot of money that's going out. One thing that's kind of interesting that I'd like you to notice is that most of our work is to the homeowners. Here, it's at this point over 90% of what we have done has been for homeowners and renters. I think that before it's all said and done, the business part of it will pick up because it takes longer to, in many cases, to put together a business package and to process it and get it closed. But even with that, probably 80% of what we'll do or more will be for homeowners and renters. And, this is something your businesses, one of the big hurdles they have is getting their employees back to work and, keeping them working. And since we do so much for the homeowners, if you'll notice there, right, we've got 76,000 people have been referred to us, homeowners or renters have been referred to us by FEMA. So far, only about 10,000 have returned their applications. It's running around 13, 14% return rate. And now, most people never return their applications for a variety of reasons. They don't understand how the program works, that they need to apply for an SBA loan. They know they can't afford a loan, or they know their credit's bad, and they basically decline themselves. But that's a mistake for many people because some of FEMA's grant programs are dependent on the SBA. So when FEMA refers someone to us, they are waiting with some of their grant money to see what we're going to do. Either we're going to offer them a loan or refer them back to FEMA where they'll give them more grant money. If they don't apply to us for a loan, we can't determine what's appropriate for them. Therefore, we can't refer them back to FEMA, and they leave money on the table. So it's real important that people apply to us for a loan. That being said, there's a lot of people who really never need to if they've got full insurance coverage and they don't need our assistance. And then you got a lot of people, I think, sometimes who are just, trying to see what's out there. But, if people have a real loss, they need to follow through with the program. And that's a message that we want to get out to all of the survivors of the disaster so that, they get all of the assistance that's appropriate for them. Our disaster assistance program, my office, we operate everything basically east of the Mississippi, including, of course, Minnesota and Puerto Rico and the VI. And we cover, the country's divided into 10 regions that's basically along the lines of the federal court system. 5 of those regions are east of the Mississippi, and so we work those 5 regions. Of course, we're here in North Carolina. This is Region 4, which is typically out of Atlanta. The FEMA's office, their regional offices in Atlanta, and a lot of the regional offices for various programs are run out of Atlanta. But disaster assistance overall, we're spread out all over the country. If you notice the map, the western side of the country, that was our office in Sacramento, and they cover regions 6 through 10, which includes Alaska, Hawaii, the Pacific possessions, Guam, etc. The loans, when people apply for the loans, they are going to be processed in Fort Worth, Texas. That's where our processing and disbursement center is. So when you talk to our loan officers and the attorneys, the people closing the loans, case managers, they're going to be more than likely out of Fort Worth. Our call-in centers in Buffalo, New York, that's our customer service center, and they're really tied into the rest of the country. You can call in there if you've applied for a loan and you don't know, what's going on for it. Maybe your customer has. They can connect them with the loan officer in Fort Worth who's handling it. And then, of course, out of D.C. and Virginia, we have our headquarters is in D.C., but a lot of our operational support is handled out of Herndon, Virginia, right outside of D.C. Our mission, of course, with the Small Business Administration is to provide low-interest disaster loans to businesses of all sizes, and that's a key. Private, nonprofit organizations, homeowners, renters, to repair or replace real estate, personal property, machinery and equipment, inventory, business assets that have been damaged or destroyed in a declared disaster. And, before I mentioned that we make loans to homeowners and renters also, this is one part of the Small Business Administration that is not limited to small businesses for physical disaster loans. So any business can come to SBA for a physical disaster loan. Now, our economic injury, our working capital loans are limited to small businesses, and we'll talk about that a little later on. But just, shows you the flexibility and the power that we have within this program to help your local business community recover from a disaster. and this tells a little bit about our history in making disaster loans. The SBA was founded in 1953, and we began making disaster loans in 1953. We were making disaster loans before FEMA existed, and we work hand in hand with FEMA, and we provide a crucial role in their disaster assistance process. Over the years, we have made over $62 billion in disaster loans to over 2.1 million borrowers. In 2017, we approved 27,000 loans for $1.6 billion. 2018 has been a much bigger year. We did 96,000 loans already for $3.7 billion. Of course, most of that was hurricanes Irma and Maria, and what was the one out in Texas? I forget. Harvey, yes, Harvey. I do everything east of the Mississippi, but and that was a busy year. I spent most of last fall in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. I'm very glad to be back stateside. So, I mentioned earlier that there's different types of disaster declarations. What you're probably most familiar with are our presidential disaster declarations. That's where FEMA comes in. That's where there are the grants. The grants are not to businesses. They're only to homeowners and renters. FEMA has two different types of disaster declarations. They have a declaration for individual assistance and one for public assistance. They usually go hand in hand, but not always. And they'll have different disaster areas. You've got, in this disaster alone, I think the public assistance is around 40 counties, and individual assistance is at 31 counties and counting. It could wind up being more at the end of the day, but as we speak, it's at 31. But what happens when you have a smaller disaster? Well, if FEMA can't approve a loan, then a governor can come to SBA and ask us for an administrative, or what we call an agency declaration. And that's when, and then there's another type is for it's a governor certification. Now, governor certification is only for businesses, and it's only the working capital aspect of our loans. Also, whenever the Secretary of Agriculture declares a disaster, the SBA can step forward with our working capital loan to help non-farm businesses. And then finally, after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, Congress passed our military reservist economic injury disaster loan program, which provides loans to small businesses when a key person is called to active duty. And the disasters, they always start at the local level response to the disaster. Of course, first of all, you'll have people like the Red Cross or other private organizations. The county will come in, and local organizations will help. But when a disaster overwhelms the resources of local community, they'll reach out to the state. And the governor starts the ball rolling with the federal government by contacting FEMA and or SBA to request that we come in and survey the damage. We call this a preliminary damage assessment. We can come in either on our own or with FEMA to assess the damage and review the results of the survey with the state. And based on those results, the governor can decide to request a disaster declaration, either from FEMA or from SBA. The request for the declaration, and then, of course, is either approved or denied. Okay, so the first type, as I said, was a presidential declaration for individual assistance. And when that happens, SBA's disaster loan program is automatically activated. And businesses of all sizes, including private nonprofit organizations, homeowners and renters, can apply for loans for their uncompensated physical losses. So this is whatever their losses are, less any insurance that they may receive or grants that they get from FEMA. We cover a lot of things that the other programs don't cover. Most losses that aren't insurable or that FEMA won't cover, we'll cover. We go a lot further than FEMA or even insurance. And then, of course, we have our working capital loans for economic injury. And as I mentioned, these are limited to small businesses and private nonprofits of any size. Sorry, thought I skipped one. And then the other type of disaster declaration is for public assistance. Now, this is where FEMA is stepping in to help primarily the local governments, the county, city governments, state governments. You know, you have a lot of damages to roadways, for example, you know, infrastructure, things of that matter that cost a lot of money to repair or replace, and there's a lot of, you know, extra expenses on the community. The SBA plays a role in that sometimes FEMA can help nonprofit organizations that provide a service of a governmental nature, but often FEMA will refer them first to the SBA to see if we can help them with the loan. And if we can, that's good. If not, we can refer them back to FEMA, and then FEMA can see if there is any assistance that they can give them. And that's our involvement with the public assistance part. Looking at our loan limits for physical and economic loans to businesses, it's $2 million, and that's a combination of $2 million. So, you know, and that actually, it includes home loans too, to the extent that, let's say a business comes in and he's lost his home and his business, we'll add up, and he owns the totality of the business, we'll add up everything to get to that $2 million limit. For home loans, the limits are a little bit smaller. They're $200,000 for real estate losses and $40,000 for personal property. That will include vehicles. And finally, we can increase a loan for mitigating devices. And this is available on any physical disaster loan where there's damage to real property. And its purpose is to prevent future loss of a similar kind to the real property. And actually, this is a little bit dated. They did update this. It used to be that it was to prevent property loss, but now you can also use it to protect human life. So, for example, if you want to build a safe room in a home, you can do that with the money. For businesses, once again, they can get any amount of money under mitigation. Well, it's based on 20% of the verified loss. Okay, so whatever we verify, 20% of the loss, and a business can get anything up to $2 million. Remember, so if the business only borrowed $1 million for physical and economic injury, but they had $5 million of total loss. It may have been insured. It doesn't matter. The total loss was $5 million. 20% of that is $1 million. So we could give a business another $1 million up to the $2 million limit. For homeowners, there is a limit up to $200,000. There should be a caveat to this. It doesn't often happen, but we do have what we call a major source of employment, and our administrator can waive our $2 million limit if someone qualifies as a major source of employment, and that can be a relatively complicated process. It takes a lot of documentation to show us, and there are some additional conditions on those loans, but in some cases we can go over $2 million. So let's talk about what is required to complete a loan application. And our loan applications really are pretty much like a regular loan application. You're going to complete an application. You have to document your income. We use tax information from the IRS as our primary source of income documentation. And so you'll complete our application. For businesses, that is a Form 5. There is a paper document, though most people nowadays apply online, and it's a pretty simple process online, but it's the exact same application online as the paper. Then we have to complete a 4506T for the IRS, and that we use that to get a transcript of the borrower's tax returns. And we're going to have to get a 4506T for not only the borrower, but also for the principals. And we define a principal as anyone who has 20% or more equity in the business. And we're also going to have to get a 4506 for any affiliate. We are going to need the most recent tax return for the applicant's business, a schedule of liabilities. We have a form for that, where they write down. It's mostly it's a list of your notes payable, your mortgages payable, your loans. You don't list like your accounts payable there typically, but you know your loan payments go on the schedule of liabilities. Personal financial statements for each owner. We use an SBA form 413, and it's a basic just personal financial statement that a bank would have you. We have a few more questions that we ask you on that. We have to get a copy of the latest tax return from each owner and affiliated business, a year-to-date profit and loss statement, and if they are interested in our working capital loans, economic injury, they will want to give us a breakdown of monthly revenues, and we look at 3 years going back. So you give us 3 completed fiscal years, monthly sales figures, plus the year-to-date, and that's a very important document in determining what economic injury is. Depending on the circumstances, we might be able to estimate some economic injury for one of your clients that comes in to apply for us, but if that's not enough money, then this monthly sales list is going to become a critical document of documentation for them to show us their information. Additional information. When we process a loan, it depends on the circumstances. there can, and this is kind of on a case-by-case basis, really. We may require additional information. We may have to get more than 1 year's tax return, depending on what's going on. We may need forecasted statements. Say you've got a brand new company, a very young company, and there's really a list that's too long for me to name. And then once the loan's approved, we may need additional information. Once again, we'll probably need a copy of the deed to the damaged property. There may be corporate documents that we have to look at, and legal circumstances can, determine what we need. We can make loans to people who are in the midst of a bankruptcy, but we'll probably need documentation from the bankruptcy court. Those aren't always easy loans to make, but we can do that. It is possible. But that could be some of the additional information that we would need. And the thing is, we really don't know what that additional information is until we get the completed application. So you want to get us the completed application, everything that we need. Let us take a look at it, and then we'll tell you what else we need. To get an approved loan, there's basically three things that have to come together. You have to be eligible for a loan. So you have to have a business or property in the declared disaster area, have an uncompensated loss, an uninsured loss, and then you have to show us, just like on any loan, that you have an acceptable credit history and that you have the ability to repay the loan. Now, I will say that on credit history, we can be more lenient than maybe a typical commercial lender would be. We will look at extenuating circumstances. And I saw a guy the other day. I looked at his credit report, and it was really for a loan that he applied for several years ago that we did not make. He had on there like tax liens and collections and charged off accounts. Now he's telling me that he's cleaned up his credit. So, you want to think ahead. If you have a situation like that, well, we're going to look at his credit score, and if his credit score is too low, or we see all these items on his credit report, our initial reaction is just going to be to decline the loan and go on to the next guy, try to make as many loans as we can as quick as we can. But if you have a client like that, maybe you want to step back and kind of prepare the application. Say, okay, let me get a copy of his credit report, see what the issues are. Let me address those up front. Let me tell you why he went bankrupt. Let me show you that this tax lien's been satisfied, or that he's got a repayment plan that he's been making. Whatever the case is, to explain the credit history. We rely heavily on credit scores, but it's not an automatic. And if there's acceptable reasons for the credit history, and we can show that the person's making good faith efforts and is being successful in resolving the issues, then we can go forward. And of course, repayment, they have to be able to show us the ability to repay the loan. So if you have a client and they don't like to pay taxes, and they just show losses every year, we say, well, they already got their loan from the federal government in the form of taxes that they didn't pay. I don't know how many times over the years I've heard people, well, I got this big house I live in. I drive around in a nice fancy Lexus, and I got an 800 credit score. What do you mean I can't repay a loan? Well, your tax return shows that you lose money every year. There's no cash flow there to pay for it. If you got a situation like that, you need to explain it to us. How do they do it? Oftentimes it is explainable. It's a good idea just to add up what all their debts are and compare them to what they've made in the past couple of years, and if it's comes up to a negative number or shows, you know, it's going to be real tight, maybe ask them, you know, just exactly how do they do it? You know, how do they intend to do it? You may have to provide a forecast of, you know, and explain just, you know, briefly. You don't have to write a book, but maybe a few sentences or a paragraph or two explaining, you know, well, going forward, this is why we're going to make money. You know, that big mortgage we just bought to expand the restaurant, and that's going to double our capacity, and we're going to have this income going forward. What's so good about an SBA loan? I'm going to tell you that an SBA loan is a great vehicle for a business. We can go up to 30 years. Nowadays, our loans are, vast majority of our loans are going to be either 15 or 30-year loans. Some of them will be 7 years, but they're usually either 7, 15, or 30 years. The interest rate is fixed for the life of the loan. These are simple interest loans, so there's no prepayment penalty for your clients. They can repay them anytime they want. They only pay interest on the time that they're borrowing the money. So, you know, if sometimes it takes a while to get these loans dispersed. Construction projects take time, and we're not necessarily going to put all the money out on the street immediately. For a construction project, it's going to take 6 months or a year. So if we make a $50,000 disbursement to a business up front, and then 3 months later make them another $150,000, and then we close it out with a $250,000 disbursement 3 months after that, they're only going to pay interest in starting at day one from the first $25,000 they got, and then, you know, when they get the next disbursement, it's, you know, $25,000 or $50,000 plus the $150,000 they got next, and then, you know, only when the loan's fully dispersed are they paying interest on the entire amount of the loan. And as a borrower can decide not to take all the loan, and that's okay with us. Generally, it's not a problem. You can use our loan to relocate. There are some limits on relocation, but relocation is usually something we can go along with. You have to have a plan, and, you know, you can't just say, well, I want to move, give me $200,000, let me go buy a house. That doesn't work. So you have to tell us what you're going to do, and we can work with someone. Those are usually those loans are usually closed in escrow. Someone buys a property, and they're harder in one sense than a construction loan, but they're also, you know, kind of easier, because if you're just buying a structure as it is, you don't have to necessarily go through the inspection process. It's just, we can get an attorney to close it for you, act as escrow agent, and just send all the money out at once. Refinancing may be eligible on a case-by-case basis. People love this aspect of our program, because if you can get, let's say, a 2% loan, and I said, what's our business rate on these? I think our business rate is 3.3675%. If you can take your mortgage and spread it out over 30 years at that interest rate, you know, it makes perfect sense. But only on a case-by-case basis is this available. You have to have a substantial uninsured loss, and that's an uninsured loss. So if there's any insurance pending, we can't consider it. We have to determine that you don't have credit available elsewhere, and you have to intend to repair or replace the property. So, you know, you can't just say, well, I'm going to refinance my mortgage and walk away from the business. I'm going to retire. Nope. You got to replace the business too if we're going to refinance the mortgage on it. Collateral requirements. This is another part of the loan that I think is pretty good. We can go for physical loans up to $25,000. So a homeowner or renter can borrow up to $25,000 without providing any collateral. Those loans are really easy to close, and the only real complication that you ever get with those is if someone lives in a flood zone and we have to require flood insurance, they just have to get it. But if they're not in a flood zone, they can close real quick. And that goes for both businesses and homeowners. For our economic injury loans are up to $25,000. So if you got a business, they can theoretically get up to $50,000 on an unsecured basis if they have enough eligibility. If they have $25,000 in eligibility for their physical losses, plus another $25,000 in eligibility for their economic injury, we can give a business up to $50,000 on an unsecured basis. And the neat thing about that is, as I said, it's easier to disperse the undispersed funds of the loan. In fact, in most loans, what we do is we disperse the unsecured portion first. So a business can come in, and if they have the eligibility for it, get a closed loan and get the first $50,000 pretty quickly. Now, we're not going to decline someone if they don't have enough equity and collateral to secure us. We'll take a second or a third mortgage on a loan. But we do require collateral that's available. So if we say that we want something for collateral, your client has to provide it to us, or we won't be able to approve the loan for them. We won't be able to close the loan for them. And we decide what is available. So we now come to what we call the three-step process, and basically applying for a loan. I've gone over, what the application is, and the first step, of course, is to apply for the loan. Probably the easiest way is to apply online at disasterloan.sba.gov. It's real easy, disasterloan.sba.gov, and you can apply for a loan. You can come by one of the centers. It doesn't matter what the center is, where it is. If we've got a disaster center, I would include one of FEMA's disaster recovery centers, one of SBA's business recovery centers, an SBA disaster loan outreach center, and it doesn't even have to be in this state. If you want to go to South Carolina and apply, or down to Georgia or Florida and apply, you can apply for a loan here in North Carolina there. Or you can submit an application by mail. The paper applications are available online. You can also call our 800 number, 1-800-659-2955. I'll have that number, I think, at the end of the slideshow. And you can apply there. Very important, especially for homeowners. The first step is to register with FEMA. There at the top, it's real easy, FEMA.gov or disasterassistance.gov, or you can call their 800 number. Most people are now applying online, disasterassistance.gov or at FEMA.gov. But, as I mentioned earlier, SBA is a critical part of FEMA's disaster assistance process. So a homeowner, we're going to pretty much require them to register with FEMA first. Technically, they don't have to, but they miss out on a lot of things. And it's not just the grants. I mean, there are other programs involved. So, registering with FEMA is a good thing. The second step is that we will inspect the damages or estimate the losses. We are doing, nowadays we're doing desktop verifications where we're calling people up and estimating the amount of damage. This is mainly for homeowners, and we can make an initial disbursement on the loan, but we'll still have to, at some point, if it's over $25,000, we're going to want to go out there and make sure that the loan amount that we've approved for them is warranted and is justified. we have to have an eligible loss under the Stafford Act. And then, of course, the loan is processed by a loan officer. And once it's approved, we'll prepare the loan closing documents and send them out to them. If the loan is not approved, your clients do have appeal rights. They basically will let them have 3 shots at it. They can ask for reconsideration, and if it's still not approved, they can ask for a final appeal. I've already talked about the disbursement process a little bit in closing the loan, and the first $25,000 is pretty quick. After that, you have to get the collateral documentation in place, got to get your insurance in place. There could be building permits required. It just depends on the loan, and sometimes those things are out of control of both the SBA and the borrowers. There are local building codes that someone has to meet to rebuild their property, then they're just going to have to meet those codes. And so that's what goes into it. And it does happen. I mean, in almost all cases, we're able to get the loans fully closed, but it is a process, and it's on a case-by-case basis depending on what is required in their specific circumstances. So why should someone apply for a loan? We've already talked about the low interest rates. We've kind of touched on the fact that we're not a collateral-based lender. We're a cash-based lender, cash flow-based lender. Our terms going up to 30 years is a pretty good deal. I've already mentioned no prepayment penalties. This next one is really important, and a lot of times FEMA will tell a homeowner, well, we got to know about your insurance before we can give you a grant. Well, SBA doesn't. We can go ahead and make you a loan to repair your property while you're still duking it out with your insurance company. And once you get your insurance settlement, you can use your net settlement to reduce or repay the SBA loan. There's no closing costs. SBA doesn't charge any closing costs. There can be cost to file a mortgage or things of that nature. If there is insurance that's required, they have to get insurance, but we don't charge points or anything like that. We've already talked a little about refinancing, relocation, mitigation. First payments are deferred. In this disaster, we're going to defer the first payments for up to a year from the date of the note. So, people who get a loan with us, that's pretty good. They get a year to get the repairs done and get back on their feet. You don't need a damage estimate to apply. We'll estimate your damages. That's not to say that it's not a good idea to take pictures and be aware of what your losses are. Sometimes that's very helpful, but it's not required. Federal state assistance may stop. I'm not sure exactly what they mean there. Loans can be changed. If you don't like the terms, ask us to change them. Tell us why they need to be changed. And if you don't like the terms, you don't have to take the terms. We'll offer you a loan. You didn't pay anything to apply for the loan. If you don't like what we offer, that's okay. Don't take it. And for homeowners, they may be referred to a grant program. So, it's real important to complete the process. This slide would go over many of the same things. We're running low on time, and I do want to give you a chance for your questions. Home loans, home loans are really easier to apply for. You just have the application, the Form 5C, and the tax authorization form. You don't need anything else unless circumstances warrant it. And then remember we had that whole big old side with additional information. So homeowners can need additional information. For example, if they've got a new job, only been on the job for less than 2 years, they'll probably need to give us a copy of their latest pay stub so we can see it. Because, we would go by what's on their tax return, but if their tax returns don't represent their current income, then we need other documentation. And there could be other things that would be required. And now I would like to, we have a few minutes, like to open it up to any questions. Do we have any questions?
We have one.
Oh.
Claudia Flores asked, could a private nonprofit apply for business loan, physical and economic injury loan to receive a total of $4 million?
They can apply for the loan, but the $2 million limit applies to them too. So, and that's for businesses too. It's the total limit is $2 million. So, they can have $2.5 million worth of eligibility, but we can only go up to $2 million unless they're a major source of employment.
Are there any other questions? If you have a question, you can also push the hand raising function and you can ask the question yourself. We'll give it a couple more seconds to see if anyone has any questions. No?
Most of this information is available at our website, sba.gov/disaster. And from there, you can also apply for the loan. You can also get copies of our paper applications there if you want to do it by hand. And then this is our main contact information. I mentioned I was going to show you our 800 number. This is real important there at the top, 1-800-659-2955, or for the hearing impaired, 1-800-877-8339. That gets our customer service center up in Buffalo. They can put you in touch with the loan officer or answer your questions, tell you what's going on with your loan. And then finally, my boss, if you didn't like my presentation, you can call Michael in Atlanta or send him an email and just throw me under the bus. I'm just kidding. I hope that you won't.
All right. So once again, we would like to thank Jack for his presentation. And next, we have another webinar coming up shortly. And it will be on working with the Division of Employment during disasters. We'll be sending out that information. And once again, if you have any ideas or topics that you want to cover in this series, please send those ideas to Patty at threadcap.org. And once again, thank you guys for all participating and attending this webinar.